I never thought a normal morning could change my life forever. I was just standing in our kitchen, still half asleep, watching the sunlight come through the window. Everything looked the same as always, but something in the air felt wrong. I could not explain it clearly, but my chest felt tight, as if my body sensed danger before my mind did. My husband, Evan, was unusually attentive that day. He spoke softly, smiled more than usual, and moved around the kitchen with nervous energy. Evan was not a morning person, and he never made coffee for me. That alone caught my attention. He placed the mug in front of me and watched my face carefully, as if waiting for something. The smell rising from the cup was sharp and bitter, not like our usual coffee. I told myself I was imagining things, yet my hands felt cold. His sister, Natalie, was staying with us at the time. She walked into the kitchen while I was staring at the mug. Evan looked startled for a moment, then quickly relaxed and greeted her. He poured another cup and set it on the counter. As they spoke, I noticed Evan's eyes moving between the two mugs again and again. His jaw tightened, and his fingers tapped against the counter. A strange fear rose inside me. I did not want to accuse him or create drama over something that could be nothing. Still, a quiet voice inside me told me not to drink that coffee. I reached out, pretending I was clumsy, and switched the mugs casually. No one said anything, but Evan froze. The color drained from his face so fast that my heart started racing. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. Natalie picked up the mug and took a few sips while chatting. I forced myself to smile and act normal, even though my hands were shaking. Evan kept staring at her, sweat forming on his forehead. Within minutes, Natalie stopped talking. Her face twisted in pain, and she doubled over, coughing and gasping. The mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Panic filled the room. Evan rushed to her side, pretending to be shocked, but his voice sounded fake and thin. I stood there, frozen, realizing that the coffee I almost drank was never meant to be harmless. If I had not switched those mugs, I might have been the one on the floor. As the ambulance sirens echoed in the distance, I looked at my husband and saw a stranger. In that moment, my marriage ended, even though the truth had not fully come out yet. I understood one thing very clearly: the person I trusted most had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and my instincts had saved my life. When Evan and I got married, life felt simple and honest. We were not rich, but we were hopeful. Evan struggled to find stable work in the early years of our marriage. Jobs came and went, and each rejection seemed to take a piece of his confidence with it. I believed in him, though. I worked longer hours, paid most of the bills, and reminded him that rough seasons don't last forever. I never complained, because I thought that was what love looked like, standing by someone when they were at their lowest. Over time, things slowly changed. Evan did find work, but instead of becoming lighter, he grew heavier inside. He spoke less. He listened less. Small conversations turned into short answers. If I asked how his day was, he would shrug. If I tried to talk about our future, he would change the subject. I told myself he was just stressed, that men sometimes retreat when they feel pressure. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who doubts without proof. In the weeks before everything happened, his mood became harder to ignore. He snapped over small things, like dishes in the sink or the TV volume. Then, without warning, he would swing the other way, too calm, too gentle, almost rehearsed. It felt unnatural, like someone trying to act the way they thought a loving husband should act instead of actually being one. I noticed it, but I pushed the thought aside. I wanted peace in my home more than answers. Around that same time, Evan's sister Natalie came to stay with us. She said she needed a place to breathe after her divorce. I agreed without hesitation. Family is family, and I knew how painful separation could be. Natalie was polite but distant. She spent a lot of time whispering with Evan in the kitchen or stepping outside with him to talk. Whenever I entered the room, their conversations would stop. They would smile, but it never reached their eyes. There was a strange energy between them that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, tense, like a wire pulled too tight. Sometimes I would catch Natalie watching me with an expression I couldn't read, half guilt, half fear. When I asked her if everything was okay, she would quickly say yes and change the subject. At night, I lay awake replaying moments in my head. Evan turning his phone screen down. Natalie avoiding eye contact. The way the house felt heavier when they were both in the room. None of it was enough to accuse anyone of anything, but all of it together made me uneasy. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. I trusted my husband. I trusted family. I believed that love meant choosing faith over fear. Looking back, I understand now that the warning signs were there. I just didn't know yet how dangerous ignoring them would be. Evan walked into the kitchen that morning with an energy I wasn't used to seeing. He told me to sit down and relax, saying he would make coffee for both of us. That alone felt strange. In all our years together, Evan never made coffee for me unless he wanted something. I watched him from the table as he moved around the kitchen, his back stiff, his movements rushed. He kept looking over his shoulder, like he was afraid I might notice something. When he placed the mug in front of me, I noticed the smell immediately. It wasn't the warm, familiar coffee smell I loved. It was sharp and bitter, almost like cleaning liquid mixed into it. I tried not to react, but my stomach tightened. Evan stood there, watching me too closely, his eyes fixed on my face instead of his own cup. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I wrapped my hands around the mug and felt my heart start to beat faster. Something felt wrong. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but every instinct in my body was telling me not to drink it. I lifted the mug slightly, pretending to take in the smell, buying myself time. Just then, Natalie walked into the kitchen, still in her robe, rubbing her eyes. Evan turned to her quickly, almost too quickly, and asked if she wanted coffee too. His voice sounded lighter, more relaxed. He poured another mug and set it on the counter near her. As Natalie reached for it, my mind raced. I didn't have proof. I didn't have logic. I only had fear and a strong feeling that I couldn't ignore. I stood up suddenly and laughed, saying I might have mixed up the mugs by mistake because they looked the same. I picked up my mug and swapped it with the one meant for Natalie, making it seem casual and careless. Evan froze. For just a second, his face changed completely. The color drained from it, and his smile vanished. His eyes widened, and his jaw tightened like he was trying to stop himself from saying something. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I saw it. I felt it. That reaction told me more than words ever could. Natalie didn't notice anything. She thanked me and took a sip without thinking. Evan sat down across from us, gripping his own mug so tightly his knuckles turned white. He barely spoke. He didn't look at me at all. I kept my face calm, even though my hands were shaking under the table. My heart was pounding so loud I thought they could hear it. I stared at my coffee, untouched, realizing that whatever was in that mug had never been meant for Natalie. And in that quiet kitchen, with the morning sun coming through the window, I understood that something dark and dangerous had just been set into motion. Natalie had barely finished a few sips before something went wrong. At first, she just went quiet. Then her face lost color, and her hands started shaking as she set the mug down. She said she felt dizzy and nauseous, like the room was spinning. Within seconds, she was bent over the kitchen sink, vomiting and gasping for air. Her knees buckled, and I rushed to hold her up before she collapsed onto the floor. Everything turned chaotic. I yelled for Evan to call 911 while I tried to keep Natalie awake. Evan looked stunned, but something about his reaction didn't feel real. His voice was loud, overly dramatic, like he was performing concern instead of feeling it. He kept repeating the same phrases, "This can't be happening," and "She was fine a minute ago," but he never once touched Natalie or tried to help me support her body. The paramedics arrived quickly. They asked questions, checked Natalie's vitals, and rushed her onto a stretcher. As they worked, one of them asked what she had consumed. I mentioned the coffee, and the look they exchanged told me this was serious. Natalie was barely conscious by then. Watching her struggle to breathe felt unreal, like time had slowed down, but my heart was racing out of control. At the hospital, doctors moved fast. Natalie was taken in for treatment, and I was left in the waiting area, shaking. Evan paced back and forth, rubbing his face, acting frantic. But every few minutes, I caught him glancing at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name, fear, maybe, or calculation. It made my stomach twist. Hours later, a doctor came out and told us Natalie would survive. They had found toxins in her system and were able to treat her in time. The word poisoned echoed in my head. I felt cold all over. My hands went numb as I realized how close this had come to being fatal. If help had arrived even a little later, the outcome could have been very different. Relief hit me first, then terror. My mind raced through every detail of that morning. The timing. The behavior. The coffee. A heavy truth settled in my chest, one that made it hard to breathe. That cup had not been an accident. Someone had planned this. Evan thanked the doctors over and over, his voice breaking in a way that sounded forced. When he hugged me, his arms felt stiff, unfamiliar. I didn't hug him back. I just stood there, staring at the hospital wall, realizing that my life had shifted into something darker and more dangerous. That night, as Natalie slept under medical supervision, I sat alone in the waiting room. Fear turned into clarity. Whatever had happened wasn't random, and whatever was coming next, I knew I couldn't ignore my instincts anymore. I did everything the doctors and officers asked, but I kept my voice calm and my face blank. I did not accuse anyone. I did not cry in front of them. I answered questions carefully and let them do their work. Inside, though, my mind would not stop racing. I kept replaying the past few months, looking for signs I had ignored. When I went back home, I acted normal. I cooked dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and spoke to Evan the same way I always had. I did not mention my fears. I watched him closely instead. I noticed how careful he was with his words, how he avoided my eyes when certain topics came up. Every small movement felt louder now, more meaningful. Late at night, when he thought I was asleep, I would lie awake listening. I heard him step outside to take phone calls. His voice was low and tense. Whenever I asked who he was talking to, he brushed it off and said it was about work. But his job had been unstable for a long time, and these calls felt different. They were secretive, rushed, and frequent. I started remembering old arguments we had. He hated that I earned more than him. He hated that the house was partly paid for with money I had saved before we married. He never said it directly, but his frustration showed in small comments, in jokes that were not really jokes. He often made me feel guilty for being successful, as if my independence was an insult to him. Then there was my inheritance from my grandmother. It was not something I talked about much, but Evan knew the details. After I received it, his behavior changed. He asked more questions about accounts and paperwork. At the time, I thought he was just being practical. Now, those memories felt heavy and uncomfortable. I also noticed how tense he became whenever Natalie was mentioned after the incident. He checked his phone constantly, then deleted messages quickly. He started sleeping poorly, waking up in the middle of the night and pacing around the house. He told me he was stressed, but the fear in his eyes did not match his words. I did not confront him. I knew better than to do that without answers. Instead, I paid attention. I kept my emotions hidden and my routine unchanged. Every day, I felt like I was living beside a stranger. The man I had trusted for years now felt unpredictable and distant. Slowly, the fear inside me began to turn into something else, clarity. I understood that whatever had happened was not random. It was planned. The pieces were starting to fit together, and the picture they formed was terrifying. I was no longer just scared. I was alert. And I knew I had to stay that way if I wanted the truth to come out. I didn't find the truth all at once. It came in pieces, and each piece made my stomach turn. While everyone thought I was still in shock, I was quietly paying attention. I checked things I had never checked before. Papers. Emails. Files Evan thought I would never touch. That's when I found the insurance documents. At first, I thought I was misunderstanding something. The policy was in my name. The amount was huge. Much more than anything we had ever talked about. And the beneficiary was Evan. My hand started shaking as I read the date. It had been signed months ago. I had never seen it. I had never agreed to it. My signature was there, but it wasn't mine. I felt sick. This wasn't just an argument or a bad marriage anymore. This was planned. Careful. Cold. I took the papers to the authorities handling the poisoning case. When they looked at it, their faces changed. They told me gently that this explained a lot. The amount of poison found wasn't random. It was measured. It was never meant to kill me instantly. It was meant to make my death look sudden but natural. Something like a heart issue. An accident no one would question. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how close I came to drinking that coffee. How easily my life could have ended without me even knowing why. A few days later, they questioned Natalie again. This time, they showed her the insurance papers. She didn't last long. She started crying and admitted everything. She said Evan came to her with the idea. He told her he felt trapped, useless, angry that I earned more and owned more. He believed the money should have been his. He said the insurance would fix everything. All she had to do was help him once. Just be there. Just keep quiet. In return, he promised her part of the money. Hearing that hurt more than anything else. Natalie had lived in my house. I had cooked for her. I had listened to her cry about her divorce. And all that time, she knew there was a plan to make me disappear. She admitted she knew about the poison in the coffee. She said she never thought it would go wrong. She thought I would drink it, get sick later, and no one would ever question it. She didn't think she would be the one to drink it instead. When I heard her confession, I felt numb. Not angry. Not screaming. Just empty. The people I trusted the most had already decided my life was worth less than money. I did not confront Evan when I learned the truth. Every part of me wanted to scream, cry, and demand answers, but I knew that would only put me in danger. I had already survived once by listening to my instincts. This time, I needed to survive by staying calm. I decided that silence would protect me better than anger ever could. At home, I acted the same as always. I cooked meals, asked about his day, and pretended not to notice how closely he watched me. Inside, I was careful with every word. I stopped sharing my thoughts and feelings. I became polite, distant, and predictable. I wanted Evan to believe that I was unaware, weak, and still trusting him completely. While playing this role, I started collecting proof. I saved messages, noted dates, and remembered exact words from our conversations. When Evan talked about money, I listened closely. When he complained about stress, I let him talk. Sometimes he slipped and said things that didn't make sense. I kept those moments locked in my memory. I worked quietly with investigators, following their advice step by step. I never rushed anything. I learned that patience was more powerful than fear. Each day I stayed calm was another day I stayed alive. Each piece of evidence I gathered made me stronger. At night, when Evan slept beside me, I barely closed my eyes. My body was tense, but my mind was clear. I planned everything carefully. I made copies of important documents and stored them safely. I moved personal items little by little so it wouldn't look suspicious. Nothing about my behavior changed suddenly. I also prepared myself emotionally. I accepted that the man I married was gone. The love I thought we shared was not real. That truth hurt deeply, but it also freed me. I stopped hoping he would explain himself or feel guilt. I focused only on protecting myself and ending this safely. There were moments when Evan tested me. He asked questions to see if I knew something. He watched my reactions closely. I answered simply and calmly every time. I did not argue. I did not accuse. My calm made him confident, and that confidence made him careless. I realized then that strength doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes strength is quiet. It is waking up every day and choosing control over panic. It is smiling when you want to cry and waiting when you want to run. By the time I was ready to leave, I had everything I needed. Evidence. Support. A clear plan. Evan still believed he was in control. He had no idea that his calm, trusting wife was already steps ahead of him. I wasn't weak anymore. I was prepared. And that made all the difference. The day everything came into the open was quiet and heavy. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene like in movies. Officers came to the house calmly and asked Evan to sit down. I stayed in the kitchen at first, my hands shaking, pretending to wipe the counter while listening. My heart was beating so hard it felt painful, but my face stayed calm. They showed Evan the evidence piece by piece. Phone records. Bank documents. The insurance papers. Recorded conversations. Each detail landed like a weight. At first, he tried to laugh it off. He said there had to be some mistake. He even looked at me, as if expecting me to defend him. I didn't say a word. When the officers explained what the evidence meant, his shoulders dropped. His voice changed. He stopped pretending. He said he was stressed. He said he felt small because I earned more. He said he felt trapped and angry, and money seemed like an easy answer. He didn't say sorry. He just explained himself, as if that would make it understandable. Then they brought up Natalie. Evan's face went pale. He asked if she was okay. That was the first thing he asked. Not about me. Not about what he had almost done. Just about her. That hurt more than anything else. The officers told him she had already spoken and that she was being charged too. He closed his eyes and nodded, like he had expected it. Natalie wasn't there, but her presence filled the room. Everything suddenly made sense. The tension. The whispers. The looks they shared. I felt sick, but also clear. There was no confusion left. No doubt. The people I trusted had planned this together. Evan started crying. He said he never meant for things to go this far. He said he thought he could control it. The words sounded empty. I realized then that the man I married didn't exist anymore, or maybe he never did. What stood in front of me was someone I didn't recognize at all. When they placed him under arrest, he didn't fight it. He didn't look at me again. As they led him out, the house felt strangely peaceful. Like the air had finally settled after a long storm. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel proud. I felt steady. The truth had done what anger never could. It had exposed everything without me raising my voice even once. I stood there alone after they left, listening to the quiet. My life had broken apart, but the lies were gone. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. I did not celebrate when everything came crashing down on Evan. I didn't shout, cry in public, or try to humiliate him. By the time the truth was out, I felt strangely calm. My emotions had already been burned out by fear and betrayal. What I wanted now was safety, closure, and control over my own life. The first thing I did was file for divorce. I did it quietly, with a lawyer who already knew the situation. I made sure every paper was correct and every step was legal. I didn't want mistakes. I didn't want delays. I wanted a clean break from the man who had planned to erase me for money. At the same time, my lawyer helped me freeze all shared accounts. Any joint savings, investments, or assets were locked down. Evan could no longer touch anything that had my name on it. Most of the money had come from my work and my family, and I was determined that he would not benefit from it anymore. Evan tried to fight back at first. He claimed he deserved something after years of marriage. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. His actions had consequences. The court saw the truth clearly. His involvement in what happened destroyed any chance he had of gaining from me financially. Natalie's role made things even worse for him. With both of them charged, Evan lost more than just money. He lost his reputation. People who once respected him no longer looked at him the same way. Doors closed. Support disappeared. He became someone others avoided. I didn't need to say a word to make that happen. I let the facts do the talking. I let the law take its course. That was my revenge, not anger, not cruelty, but justice. As the divorce moved forward, I focused on rebuilding myself. I moved out of the house that no longer felt safe. I started sleeping without fear again. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Evan's future fell apart piece by piece. His plans failed. The life he tried to steal from me was gone forever. He lost his freedom, his marriage, and the trust of everyone around him. I didn't feel joy watching him fall. I felt relief. Relief that I was still alive. Relief that I listened to my instincts. Relief that I walked away with my life and my dignity intact. In the end, I learned something powerful. True revenge doesn't come from hurting someone back. It comes from surviving, standing firm, and refusing to let betrayal destroy you. Sometimes, winning is simply making sure the person who tried to break you has no power over your future ever again. I spent a long time thinking about everything that happened and how close I came to losing my life. It still feels unreal that a normal morning turned into something so dark. I realized that survival is not always about strength or bravery in big moments. Sometimes it comes from a quiet feeling inside that tells you something is wrong. That feeling saved me when nothing else could have. I used to believe that love meant trusting without question. I thought loyalty meant ignoring doubts and always giving the benefit of the doubt. What I learned is that blind trust can be dangerous. Real love does not make you feel uneasy or small. It does not require you to ignore your instincts. Looking back, my body and mind knew the truth before I was ready to accept it. I also learned that betrayal often wears a kind face. It can come with smiles, gentle words, and small acts that look like care. That is what makes it so painful. The people who hurt you the most are often the ones closest to you. Accepting that truth was harder than anything else I faced. It forced me to let go of the version of my life I thought I had. Walking away was not easy. There were days filled with fear, anger, and deep sadness. I mourned the marriage I believed in and the future I imagined. But with time, I started to feel something else too, relief. Relief that I was alive. Relief that the truth was out. Relief that I no longer had to pretend or protect someone who never truly cared about me. I learned the value of self-respect. I learned that staying silent does not always mean weakness. Sometimes it is the smartest and strongest choice. I did not need to scream or destroy anyone to feel powerful. I simply chose myself. I chose to live, to heal, and to move forward without carrying someone else's darkness. Today, I trust myself more than ever. I listen when something feels off. I do not ignore my inner voice to keep the peace. Peace built on lies is not peace at all. True peace comes from honesty, even when it hurts. If there is one lesson my story holds, it is this: pay attention to your instincts. They exist to protect you. Do not excuse behavior that makes you uncomfortable. Do not confuse control with care or fear with love. You deserve safety, respect, and truth. I walked away alive, aware, and stronger than before. That is not just survival. That is victory.